Welcome to today's live webcast on business disruption. This episode is on adaptation and innovation. My name is Steve Waite. I'll be your host today. For those of you that don't know the Business Centre, we're a not-for-profit organisation with a 35-year history of helping small businesses through providing business advice and practical education in collaboration with industry experts and in partnership with local, state and federal government small business programs. And it is with the support of the New South Wales Government's Business Connect program that we're able to bring you this small business disruption webcast today on adaptation and innovation. And our special guest today is Heath Raftery. Welcome, Heath. Good to see you.
Thank you, Steve.
Now, Heath is the Director and Principal Engineer of NewieVentures. He finds challenges irresistible. He's on a relentless drive to become redundant through reliable design, education, value generation, and a better way to innovate. Heath is immensely passionate about technology and innovation, but in particular, he is motivated to ensure technology and innovation work to make a positive difference in people's lives. His determination to make an impact has led to the establishment of NewieVentures, a nimble engineering design house and vehicle for innovation. Heath has more than 15 years' experience in product development, embedded electronics, research and technical analysis with specialities in hardware design for manufacturability, artificial intelligence, data communications and signal processing. Heath's experience covers the journey from idea to market entry, including scoping, manufacturing and validation. His inquisitive and tireless pursuit of opportunity has led him to an array of interesting projects for designing and commissioning a revolutionary small wind turbine to establishing a STEM education program for young children. Now, morning Heath, great to see you. We're really looking forward to this chance for small businesses to get an insight into how technology, including the Internet of Things, can actually be accessible for small businesses, not just large, complex organisations. Now, one of the projects that you've been involved in notably, you've been very much a part of, the innovation ecosystem in regional New South Wales, but also nationally and internationally. But we'd like to use as some case studies today a project that you've been involved with New South Wales Health Pathology, the sepsis point of care IoT diagnostic system, and I know that we can draw on that today. But more recently, being one of the engineers that were part of an amazing response to the current pandemic, where New South Wales Health approached AMP Control and requested the potential provision of 600 ventilators in 28 days, and you were called upon to be part of a project team of engineers. So we're going to have a chance to talk about some of those a little later, but to get an insight into this, we have a clip that is on the NewieVentures website, which is going to allow us to get a bit of a look inside the AMP Control ventilator project for New South Wales Health, which will roll now.
So back on the 21st of March, we received a call from Health New South Wales to see if we could mobilise and build 600 ventilators in 28 days. The engineers considered this to be an absolutely wonderful challenge. They hadn't worked on a project quite like this before. We design a lot of equipment for the mines, for the infrastructure and the energy markets. So for someone to come along and ask us, can we build a ventilator? Well, it was almost a challenge they couldn't refuse, really. The team is headed up by our Group Engineering Manager in Webster. We had about anywhere between 15 and 20 engineers working on the project. We also collaborated with a couple of local Newcastle companies, Safe Earth and NewieVentures, and also with the University of Newcastle. I think it was a wonderful challenge for the guys. The time, the effort that they spent on getting a prototype up and running in 11 days, and then having, after 18 days, over at the John, working with the clinicians and the biomed engineers on the simulator unit over there, and also training a nurse within 3 minutes to operate the system was quite incredible. So the next move for us now is to manufacture 10 pilot units. They will be deployed out to different hospitals to be tested in the field. So once we get through those 10, that is the first portion of this contract delivered for New South Wales Health. And then depending on the need across the state and across the world for that matter, we'll see where we go to from there.
Okay, very insightful overview of the ventilator project there. But let's get to our conversation with you today, Heath, with our aim being to provide practical but potentially vital information for how small businesses can adapt their business through this difficult time through adaptation and innovation. So knowing your practical and pragmatic approach that I think we both share to innovation, I'd like to, I guess, introduce the themes that we agreed for our conversation, and very similar to one that we did earlier on innovation alone. But the first theme that we like to discuss is that in a crisis, there's always a seed of opportunity. And following on the Chinese word wei qi for crisis, which has two elements, danger and opportunity, that suggests no matter the difficulty or circumstances, no matter how dangerous the situation, at the heart of each crisis lies a tremendous opportunity. Then we'll move on to a second theme, and that second theme in our discussion is part of economic theory in disruption, which talks to destruction through process of industrial mutation, incessantly revolutionises the economic structure from within, and incessantly destroying the old one, incessantly creating a new one. So this allows us to find early rents, is sometimes the term used in Schumpeterian theory. So sometimes through this disruption there's an opportunity for early rents. And then we'll move on to a third theme, which will be to focus our conversation with you on this concept of design, which I know you're very much aware of as well in regard to providing the right solution. Design is so important. And having an understanding of how your innovation, your idea or your product or your service is best delivered to a market. And I guess with those introductions of projects you're working on at the moment, specifically associated with the pandemic and the health issues, there are other examples that you can draw upon as well that I know that we can introduce into our conversation. So, with that in mind, perhaps we could move firstly to the first question, which we ask everyone in our webcast. That is, how are you dealing with this? How did this hit you in your organisation, with you, like all of us? What's it been like for you?
Thanks, Steve, and thanks for the question. Yeah, I think sometimes we skip over that element of how does it impact you? Yeah. So obviously, as a small business owner, there's a whole bunch of competing forces going on, and a lot of those change very, very quickly. Yeah. So we work in electronics. So we actually, when I was reflecting on it, we had a little bit of early warning. Certainly not as early as some people, but we noticed some disruption in our supply chain as we were trying to get product out of China. Yep. And like most of the world, we thought this was a transient thing, and we just wanted to know when it was going to be over. Yes. It became more and more apparent that perhaps this wasn't a short-term event, and we were going to see repercussions. Yeah. And it was only time before we started to see this the impact on our doorstep. Yeah. So we had early warning, but I think, like most people, we were unable to estimate or foresee just what that impact would be. Yes. So we attempted to maintain business as usual for a long period of time, as many people did. You know, you put the brave face forward and say, we're not disrupted, we're not concerned, we're not going to see an impact from this, and carry on. In fact, we were in the final stages of negotiating a lease on a new building. We'd expanded to the point where we were bursting at the seams, and we were taking a very exciting, very onerous step of moving. And on the Monday morning, we were having difficulty in negotiating the lease. Some of the terms weren't coming together at the final minute. On Tuesday, we pulled out of that lease. We said these terms are not appropriate. Tuesday afternoon, we implemented work from home, and our staff vacated the building, and we didn't have to pay for a lease on a building that we weren't going to occupy. So interesting turn of events when you look at it. But transitioning to work from home was extremely challenging. Our staff were superbly responsive. Each had their own level of urgency, anxieties, preparation, concerns about what this meant for their role, and all those had to be managed. And so I set out, on that Tuesday, I set out 3 priorities for our staff. I said, our number one priority is our people. We need to understand your reactions, how prepared you are, what the risks are for you working home, how you think you'll cope with it, how you're feeling in this crisis. This is not just a business crisis. This is a personal crisis for a lot of people who have very, very deep questions and concerns about what this means. Our second priority was our customers. It was very important that we communicated as we normally do, but in excess of that. We kept them updated on where we're at.
Yeah.
We informed them ahead of time if we thought things were going to slip, if we weren't able to get product as quickly as we thought we could, but that we would up our game to try and meet their requirements. Our customers were relying on us to provide a bit of bedrock of stability through what was a very, very disruptive time.
Yeah.
And then finally, third priority was the business.
Yeah.
So we needed to ensure that we had a strong business
Yes.
that could survive the storm.
Yeah.
We are but a small sailboat in amongst a big sea of chaos, and we needed to make sure our boat was strong and it was going to get through, sail through to the other side.
So knowing what I do from some of the information that you provided to me about your organisation, your business, you've got some quite sophisticated products and some quite sophisticated customers. On that side of producing these solutions and coming up with these new technologically based devices or integrated devices and software and hardware, how tolerant were your customers in regard to delivery or continuity of what it was that you were providing?
Yeah, interesting question. So it evolved.
Right.
People didn't know what to expect at first, and of course everyone tried to maintain business as usual, and then they said, actually, these are quite unusual times, and maybe we need to accommodate what's going on here.
Yeah.
So we found, I made some very difficult phone calls in that week to each of our customers and said, are you with us? Essentially, we don't know what's ahead. It's going to be rocky. We want to do our best by you. What are your plans? Are you planning to shelve these projects? Are you planning to accelerate them? Are you planning to just to go dormant for a little while? And every single one of them said, this is essentially, can you keep going?
Wow.
Can you, we think this is an essential time. We've got chaos. We've got stuff falling all around us. We need to fight some fires.
So despite the fact that it was an exceptional time, the pathway that they were on, they wanted you to continue with it in some way that was adapted in itself.
They saw the innovation process as something that, if at all possible, should continue.
Wow.
Which makes a lot of sense in hindsight. They wanted to emerge on the other side of whatever we're going through in a position where they were able to capture new markets, and so innovation was a key aspect of that. And so they looked at us to say, can you be that bedrock? Can you be that consistency?
Wow.
We understand things are slower and we need to adapt, and you might not be able to do things the way we normally can do them, but we want you to try, which was music to my ears.
Very assuring, isn't it?
I could have. They could have been very, very different. So they were reassuring conversations.
Do you mind if I move to our first question in detail, which is, as we said, those three themes? The first one I'd like to look at is this Chinese concept of crisis carrying two elements of danger and opportunity, which we've begun to touch on. But what read do you make right now while we're in the eye of this current storm? And I know perhaps we could use the AMP control project or any other project you've been involved with, but I know with the AMP control project there was a whole set of constraints which you've touched on, such as design quality and freight restrictions and access to components and alternative parts. So can you unpack that for us as a process, in regard to danger and opportunity, and maybe around that case study?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's a great framing of the situation. It is a crisis. There is danger. There are things to be concerned about, and we should give them credence. But there is also opportunity. I spoke on a webinar last week about the essential themes in creativity, and creativity is the beginning of the innovation journey.
Yes.
And those essential themes are tension and constraints.
Wow.
So in order to have creative outcomes, you need some element of disagreement, of unsettlement, of not being happy with the status quo. Friction, yes, precisely. Yeah. And you also need constraints, because constraints give you boundaries.
Yes.
The world is a vast place, and we can't fix it all at once, but if we give ourselves boundaries, we only have so much money, we only have so much time, we're not unavailable, there's things that we can't obtain. And so those elements we thrive in. So to have a situation where we were pressed for time,
and this through it actually was quite clear, 28 days with a potential outcome of a very defined product for a particular end use, for an actual customer, not a conceptual customer.
Yeah, and I do wonder whether that was phrased deliberately, because it was perfect. It was a red flag at a ball, because we all understood that there was a pressing need, and that we didn't have infinite time to deliver it, and we needed to prioritise things very quickly. And one of the things that we didn't have was time, which means that we couldn't follow a linear development process. We couldn't say, we think this is the right thing to do, so let's try that, fail, try the next thing, fail, try the next thing. Our time would have been evaporated. So very early on, everyone in that team that was brought together said, we need to paralyse this. We need to entertain ideas that seem silly now, that may not come to fruition, but will inform other activities.
Wow.
And so we took on about 6 different listed paths that needed exploration, and then we were very quick to terminate them when they reached their point of utility. Some of them did that early on. They proved to not be useful. Others lingered for a fair while and continued to inform the other activities that were going on.
Wow.
And then it became clear and apparent to us all that there was one particular path that we had taken on day one, which was showing the most promise to get us to that 600 in 28 days, and eventually all resources turned towards supporting that activity.
I'm fascinated for the dynamics within that process, given there's a diverse group of engineers and experts, and the meta language, or the way that you're communicating with each other and managing the project methodology. What were some of the aspects there?
Well, so the diversity was key.
Right.
The lead in AMP Control, Ian Webster, owes a lot of credit for this. He sought out individuals that he recognised would offer contrasting opinions.
Really? Deliberately so?
Deliberately so. So this is something we don't shy about, is having that tension, and having opinions strongly held, well, strongly supported, but weakly held.
Yep.
And so the people around that table in the early days were quick to support ideas that they thought needed support, and they were quick to learn from others as well. Often we find that when an idea is brought up, it's not necessarily the idea that was useful, but the discussion that it causes. You know, the fact that it forces people to convince each other of why that idea has strength or why it doesn't have strength. And sometimes it's not the original idea that is the valuable thing that comes out of that. It's oh, I didn't think about it that way. That means, and then off we go, and we move in a better direction.
So the learnings from that for small and medium-sized enterprises and small businesses around innovation is that you do have to enter into the process of innovation. You have to have the mindset to be looking to be doing something that is different, and to bring in diverse people into the process by almost, as you said there, deliberately. I think Ian's words were, it was so important to bring other people in and contribute to the project by bringing their own ideas, but with a common sense of purpose for what it was that you want to achieve.
Precisely, yes. So we can all have our same ideas, but we were given that common goal. And so we recognised, while everyone had a different way about getting there, we were all focused on getting to the same goal line, the same finish line.
Yep. All right. I want to move to our next question, which is, if that's okay, and
Certainly.
there's plenty of time for us to revisit and some of these things. The next one is about what part, the economics play around this, and a theory that says or suggests that we can take advantage of early rents that are often available through markets that are diminishing or broken, or that have opportunity within them because of a change. So keeping those things in mind, and given what I quoted from you at the start, where you said, I think collaborative projects are the only way to do innovation in this country. What are your thoughts about that concept of early opportunities and some of the other projects you've been involved in that have needed adaptation or innovation, where you can see the beginning of a new market or a new use of new technologies coalesce together around IoT type projects?
Sure. I mean, there's an arm's length list of examples where this applies.
Pick one for us.
So many times we find that largely our value when we come to a customer is not to necessarily be the smartest person in the room, but to ask people to explain what's in their head, and that process of rubber ducking, of having someone else that you have to explain to, starts to tease out ideas, and having an intelligent collaborator who isn't familiar with your world, but nonetheless can start to understand it and can ask those questions and test those assumptions is an incredibly valuable activity. So probably the relevant example is the New South Wales Health Pathology. So when we got involved in that was a good example of a project where internally New South Wales Health Pathology had extraordinary expertise, great resources, very, very good systems to automate the process of analysing pathology data. But from their viewpoint, it was difficult to piece them together, to patch it together in a way that that actually delivered a solution to the customer at the end of the day. And so our contribution was relatively small compared to the labour in the project overall, but it was key in bringing those different aspects together and actually delivering something to the customer. And now that project helps point of care providers like GPs and paramedics to provide pathology results right there at the time. They've realised that the world is a little bit disrupted now, and coming into a GP's office to provide a pathology result is challenging at the moment, and that presents an opportunity to advance technology associated with hospital in the home. So that same technology has now been redirected or found a new purpose in providing hospital and the home services. So instead of coming into your GP to do that pathology test, you can have the equipment at home and you can operate it yourself, and clinicians can provide their expertise remotely. Same technology, totally different application, because an opportunity was created through crisis.
Can we just take this a bit further? Because some of the research I did before we began our conversation today, that with the scale or the scope of the project put to you, the brief put to you by New South Wales Pathology Sepsis Point of Care, was an IoT diagnostic system. But this project had some strong economic drivers behind it, in that, as I understand, there are 15,700 patients who do present as a result of infection, sepsis, and that is at a cost of about $39,000 per episode. So there was a strong economic driver for a solution to address that, and then when we layer in the pandemic, it brings even more of the elements together. And one of the things I discovered from your area of work and some of the things you spoke about was this concept of containerising a solution. So the solution goes into a box, but what you're saying here is that there was data, there were third-party medical devices around this, there was software, there was a diagnostic organisation in New South Wales Health Pathology, and they were looking to bring all of this together. And this is where your work can be, I guess, illustrated, where, and I'd never heard of the term before, but you're containerising IoT into a box, bringing all of that together with the cloud. So do you want to tell us a bit more about how does all that work? How does it all come together?
I'm not going to delve into the technical details of containerisation, although it's an interesting technology, but I think the concept is more interesting. So we often go through journeys with customers who say, I'm trying to build a product that needs this and this and this and this. And we say, look, what does your product do? And they're like, oh, it needs to have a battery, it needs to have an LED and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I know. What does your product do? Well, it's got to provide this surface. The user uses it in this way and blah, blah, blah. And we find out what the product does. And then we can say, look, 60% of it already exists in this container here. Another 30% of it exists over here. There's only 10% we actually have to create, and we can patch these things together and we can deliver you the outcome that your market needs without having to create from scratch all these elements. So the number one thing that we ask every time a customer comes in and they say, I need a custom product, we say, can you find it off the shelf?
Wow.
And usually that's the first thing we do, because if you try and reinvent everything from the ground, you're ignoring decades and decades of effort that has gone into creating what could be 90% of your product. And so this concept of containerisation leans on that.
Yeah.
It says, what if we could take something that we created for one purpose,
Yes.
and then we could, for all intents and purposes, run that same thing in a different environment,
Yes.
and the outside of it looks completely different.
Yeah.
It's a completely different application,
Yeah.
but inside it's got all that same intelligence, knowledge, IP that's been generated.
Yeah.
So this.
So that's adaptation. That's repurposing. That's the whole premise of adaptation.
Repurposing,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we were to take that a bit further, we've got some questions which we do take live. I'll just look at a couple of those at the moment, if that's all right, Heath.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Dave asks, I have an idea for a new type of emergency switch for my restaurant. What's my first step?
Give us a call, David.
But conceptually, we're getting into design. We've got a question on design, which is the one we're looking at next. But
So the first questions we would ask is essentially how would your end user use this? What's their story?
Yeah.
How do they approach this thing? How do they interact with it? And then what is the result?
Yeah.
So what is the value that this creates?
Yeah.
And if you can start to articulate that,
Yeah.
then we can start to think about the best way to implement that.
Okay.
Often, and it's a reasonable approach to take. Often we think about the other way.
Yeah.
I want to switch.
Yeah.
Well, okay, it might end up being a switch, but it's useful. I know it's a little bit painful, but it's useful to think about what is it that you want to do, what is the outcome, what is the value that you're looking to generate.
Yeah.
Then we can think about what the implementation might be.
Yeah. Okay. We've got another question here, which is sort of very topical. Has the COVID crisis made you think about using Australian onshore suppliers, partners, or even staffing? Is this a strategy that is particular to industry, will be strongly moving forward and for future planning? So what are your thoughts around that?
Gosh, I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fantastic that we're having this discussion, to be honest. And I think Minister Karen Andrews has sort of come full circle on this, and it's encouraging to see that a little bit of sense is coming into this thinking. The one thing that she did say is that when this pandemic resolves to a certain extent, we will not be manufacturing face shields. And for a lot of people, that's a dagger in the heart, because we're very effective at manufacturing face shields now. We've scrambled and we can do that sort of stuff. Fact is, we do not have a sustainable industry in creating low-value goods. We are very good at resource generation, extracting raw materials. We are very good at creating high-value goods. We are not well set up to produce low-value goods. So when we're looking to use onshore labour, onshore resources, onshore capability, we have to look at what our strengths are. And they are vast. They are great. We have a lot to leverage that we are not leveraging. And so I think it's fantastic that we're shining a light on the fact that domestically we have a great deal of capability, and there are benefits in using that capability. I just don't want people to get wound up in the parochial advantage of using domestic labour because it makes us feel good. That's great, but it's not sustainable. So it needs to be sustainable, and it can be sustainable if we focus on what we do well, what we're world's best at. And there's a lot. There's a lot.
Indeed. Well, that's a good question that we've got next here, which is Meg asked, I'm studying engineering at the University of Newcastle. What are the emerging trends in the electronic world, i.e., IoT? So give us some of the neat stuff that you could share with an audience.
Boy. By the time you finish your degree, Meg, all this information will be irrelevant because the trends will have shifted. The containerisation is certainly a big one. The IoT, I run a monthly meetup group, or did when we had monthly meetup groups, called Newcastle IoT Pioneers. And the theme that I've been beating the drum about is the fact that the Internet of Things is going away as a thing. People recognise that the technology is there. It's like the internet. A few people talk about how, can we use the internet? Well, no, the internet's just there. It's a tool. It's in our toolbox. The more important question is, what are we going to do? So the trend that I'm seeing that I'm really excited about is people who are talking about value generation using the IoT toolbox.
Tell me more.
So people are talking about how, and this is a really powerful economic driver, the virtuous cycle. Amazon popularised this idea a little while ago, where they talked about how if we can instrument our products that we deliver our customers, then we can provide incremental benefit to that product. You know, we can add a little feature. It's connected to the internet, so therefore you know what it's doing on your phone when you're remote to it. Okay, there's an incremental benefit from instrumenting that product for the user. But what becomes extraordinarily beneficial is that the manufacturer, the designer, the product owner, learns about the use of that product.
Wow.
They learn about when it sits dormant, how long it gets used for, ways it gets used that they never intended, and they build that into the next version of the product. So they're constantly collecting this feedback on how their product are used, and that's causing real big shifts. That's very interesting. So you see tyre manufacturers who can't sell a $400 tyre when everyone's already buying $200 tyres because the $400 tyres are more expensive, and who's going to want to buy that? Tyre manufacturers are now looking at, well, look, we'll give you the tyre for free, but we're going to put a sensor in it, use the IoT, and we'll know how many revolutions that tyre's done, and you can just pay us per the mile.
Oh my God.
We know our $400 tyre lasts 5 times as long. You don't have to worry about that. We'll take care of that. We'll just charge you by the mile. And we know this tyre's going to last longer, so we're happy to do that.
Same product, same customer, different business model.
And notice how they weren't selling the IoT. They're still selling tyres.
Yes.
The fact is that what's changed is that they're better able to provide effectively servitization. They're able to turn their product into something that continually improves and continue to provide a service to their customer.
Now, we could talk to you all day, as you said, an arm's length of ideas. I've got a couple of more questions, and then I'd like for us to get on to our last question. Then we're going to get on to your tips. But Cara asks, I close my business due to events, weddings cancelling. As a makeup artist, a very close proximity to clients for long periods of time is required. Can I work again soon, or could she re-skill in this era, you know, in regard to technology and that type of thing?
Wow, I really feel for that scenario. That's look, the first thing is condolences. There's some businesses, and I do want to give this weight. There's some businesses for which the current environment is not compatible with.
Yes.
And I know there's a very popular statement out there that says, you know, we need to adapt, we need to innovate, we need to move with the times. For some businesses, that's simply not practical, and so things will shift. And it resonates with me. Our business is very hands-on. It's very physical. We need to be close to our customers. We need to work with them. We need to deliver things. And so to pretend that there's no impact is ridiculous, and it's not fair.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great question, and I think for some businesses, the current environment is simply not compatible. We will return. There will be a return to, I know you hate the term, a new normal. And we can re-look at that business and have a look at how it will apply in the new normal. And we can look at regenerating those businesses at that point. But I think we have to allow some businesses to recognise that effectively they're pushing excrement uphill if they try and adapt.
It's just not there. We've got one more question, then I want to move on to our last question. But I know that you're quite passionate about STEM and the importance of that. So can you tell us a little bit more about STEM and the program that you've been involved in for young people around STEM? Yeah,
sure. So I am the product of 2 teachers. There are many teachers in my family. I married a teacher. I can't get away from education. It runs very, very deep in me. And so now that I'm in industry, I am very excited about being able to contribute to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education, STEM education. I am concerned that that STEM education has been co-opted by vested interests in producing low-value programmers. So a lot of STEM education beats the drum on coding. And I think that's it's an unnecessary reduction in the value of STEM. STEM is creative, and STEM can be physical. It requires a lot of empathy, and it requires the ability to communicate your outcomes.
Yeah.
You know, when I was going through university education, I had this epiphany halfway through my degree.
Yeah.
I came from a small pond and into a large pond, and I recognised that although I was very successful academically at university, there was a lot of other smart people there.
Yeah.
And I thought, why does no one recognise how smart these people are?
Yes.
And it dawned on me that it's, you don't wear that on your face, right?
No.
No one walks up to you and goes, "You're a really smart person, I love you."
Yeah.
They walk up to you and they say, "You care about me, I love you."
Yeah.
So I had this epiphany and recognised that it doesn't matter how smart you are, if you can't make people care, it's wasted.
Yeah.
So when we were designing our STEM program, I tried to instill some of those values into it. And so we run a STEM program called Mini Sparks, where we get children 8 to 10 years old into a room, and we get them to build little bits and Lego and objects and things. But we give them challenges. Yeah. You need to design something that's going to go from here to here. Yeah. Go through the process, do some experimentation, fail a little bit, learn from it, recreate, and then here's the kicker: once you've created it, you've got to stand out the front and sell it to the rest of the class. Yeah. So who would buy this? Why is it important? Why would they care? How much would it be? How would it change their lives? What would be important about it? Yeah. And so it's been very successful. It's been very rewarding to be able to do that.
Now we're going to move on to our last question, which is, and this is where I'd just like to explore this tenet of designing, so user experience versus design, and we kind of touched on there. Who's the end user? What's the utility of this venture? Why did we do this? What's it for? Can you perhaps just give us a sense of what do you think for some small businesses and medium businesses? What can they do to design to take something that they're doing in their business and to say, I want to do this differently. I want to do it better. I want to adapt what I'm doing for a new operating marketplace, for a different way of doing what I'm doing, because I have to be able to respond to change economically or in my market. But how do they do that? How do they design something? How would you give someone a tip to say, I've got a problem? Can they do some pre-work before they get to someone like you to design a solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we'll ask people to do, and it's the key to design, is think about the user. So it's so tempting to think about the solution and think about how good the world will be once this thing exists. And I love that, and I fall in love with that as well. And so it's a constant effort to ensure that we're applying design principles, and that is to think about the user. And don't assume. Don't assume that what's in your head is what will be accepted by the market. Yes. So you need to include the user in those early conversations and say, how would you use this? Not what would you do, what do you want? Because no one knows what they want until they get it. Instead, here, how would you use this? What's your reaction? Wow. Here's a crappy version of this thing that I'm thinking about. How would you use that? And then observe. Watch them pick it up and watch them go through their process of doing whatever their job is or whatever task they're trying to solve.
In the chain of process for that, with the work that you do in your work, at some point you will hand or partner with a firmware producer. So this prototype or this form of what someone's come up with, at some point has to be handed over to someone that builds it into its final form to go to market. Is that right? So how does that work? So we've worked with you for a period of time. We've developed an iterative prototype that's got some utility. We then, how do you go out to that market? The firmware, the organisation that builds the thing that you've come up with. How does that work?
So we provide certain elements of the product design journey. So we have skills and expertise in electronics, in firmware, in enclosure design, in testing, in certification, in those sorts of elements. There's other elements that we don't do well, that we draw on external resources to do. So depending on the needs of the product, we'll focus on our areas of expertise, and we'll draw in other areas of expertise to fill in those other elements. But what's important is that we get to carry that idea all the way through, rather than throwing things over the fence.
Okay.
So you see in a lot of organisations, someone will design the thing, make it really nice and pretty, and then they'll throw it over the fence to the electronic designer to add the PCB and the LEDs and all those sorts of guff, and they'll throw it over the fence to the firmware guy to write the software and do all that sort of stuff. And then you get it back and it's nothing like what you expected, because they didn't talk to each other, and they had a constraint, and they didn't work to sort these constraints out. So we, while we draw on expertise to put all those elements in, we make sure that we're not throwing things over the fence, that we're having those conversations at every one of those interface points.
Right. So your methodology, or your approach, or your principles mean that it's important that if someone's got this idea, concept, innovation, that they have someone like an organisation like you or with you to take them along all parts of that process. So you've kind of done the pre-work, you know, the constraints and tolerances, and you're able to guide them through, you know, what was still a long journey, isn't it, to get to market?
Yeah. Look, I've often said no successful product makes it to the market unless someone is thinking about it in the shower in the morning. Someone's waking up in the middle of the night thinking about who's looking after their baby. Josh Jeffers talks about how this is, you can often think of it like a marriage. The people that are involved in this product design journey, they're getting into a marriage. They're going to have conflict, they're going to have arguments, but at the end of the day, they're going to make babies, and they're going to make those babies together. And so you've got to love the baby. You know, you've got to nurture it, and you've got to carry it through.
Indeed.
So whether it's us, I mean, depending on the customer, if we can provide that service, then yes, we'll be the one to care and carry for that baby all the way through. Sometimes our customers fill that role, and we simply guide it like a shepherd sort of role. It all depends.
All right. Well, Heath, we've got so much more we can talk about, and we could probably do that again at another time. I know that you've got a whole range of experiences in smart cities as well, and technologies in urban environments and rural environments and drone technology. There's a whole range of places we can go, but I want to thank you very much for being with us, and I'm going to wrap up today. People need to be, I guess, prepared to adapt and innovate, and should be conscious of the opportunity all the time, and that is inherent during periods of distraction. But I'd just like to wind up by talking to the fact that the clouds will go away from this. I think we've spoken about that at some point. This won't be with us forever, but I guess the omelette is made, and the eggs have been scrambled. It's what parts do we keep? So you can find out more about Business Connect, and you can find out more certainly about the Business Centre and providers of Business Connect around the state by going to Business Connect and Googling that, and you'll be able to get a local provider. You can also find all of these webcasts on our YouTube channel, and you can also find much more about the Business Connect program by coming to our website or going to the Business Connect website. I'd finally like to thank very much Jono and Tom, our amazing team at Fordtronic, who provide the webcast expertise and technology behind this webcast, and who have been our AV partners over a whole range of projects, and who we strongly endorse. If you'd like to talk with them about implementing webcasting as part of your business, or want to talk to us at the Business Centre about filming or casting an event, then reach out to us. If you'd like to contact Heath or NewieVentures, please contact us and we'll forward on your details. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation offline after this to get some tips from Heath about your adaptation or innovation journey. But I'd just like to close there, and thank you very much for joining us today.